talking with Brendan O'Neill, the author of a new book called After the Pogrom. You've just been talking about Western, as in people born in the UK, sometimes called old stock Brits. That's the phrase we use in Canada, old stock Canadians. And there's a lot of psychological things happening there. A lot of it is getting back at dad, I think. But my observation from the big hate marches I've attended in London and what I see in my own country is that 85, 90% of the people are not those Socialist Workers' Party whites. They're not the Jeremy Corbyns. They are, not to put too fine a point on it, Muslim immigrants who have perhaps become even more radicalized in the UK and Canada than they were at home. Maybe they're being organized by Iran. I mean, in Canada, we had a report there are 700 Iranian agents operating in the country, whipping up a lot of these protests we have that, I mean, sure, I think that they would happen organically, but they've been financed and promoted and organized and programmed by an active foreign element. And I think that there's really two debates. How do you handle Westerners who have turned against their own selves, so sort of suicidal Westerners, but there's also people who come here in mass numbers from Pakistan, from Gaza, now coming to Canada. I don't think that they are as susceptible to course correction. I don't think, studying the Western classics, having Holocaust Awareness Week, that's not going to deprogram millions of people who come to the West from endemically anti-Semitic regimes. I think you've got two problems. They're problems together, but the solution for mass anti-Semitic immigration is a very different one for woke millennials who are looking for meaning. What do you think?
Yeah, we have a very serious problem in Europe with radical Islam. It's reached catastrophic levels, and hundreds and hundreds of people have been killed in Europe over the past 20 years by radical Islamists. Around 100 have been killed in Britain since 2005, and many, many more in France, but also in Spain, in Belgium, even in Finland. People have died at the hands of radical Islamists. So we have a very serious problem, and people don't want to talk about it. And in fact, when you do talk about it, you're accused of Islamophobia, you're accused of stirring up hatred. I'll never forget that after the Manchester Arena bombing in 2017, when 22 young people were killed by a suicide bomber, they were at an Ariana Grande concert. The song we were all encouraged to sing was the Oasis song, Don't Look Back in Anger. There were vigils around the country where people were singing Don't Look Back in Anger. And that's the whole vibe after a terrorist attack in Europe. Your only responsibility as a citizen is to lay a flower, say something mournful on social media, and then get on with your life. Don't ask any questions, don't get angry, don't raise any prickly issues that society might want to address. So there is this culture of amnesia around terrorist attacks. We are encouraged to forget them. And also there's a culture of censorship around the issue of radical Islam. But it's a real problem. The way I see it, I think the way in which Europe has handled the immigration question over the past 7 or 8 years has been really, really bad. And the migrant crisis of a few years ago has unquestionably contributed to serious problems in some European societies, including Sweden, including Germany, various parts of Europe that brought in large numbers of largely Muslim migrants. They have got lots of social problems as a consequence of that. And it's not racist to talk about that. It's not racist to raise questions about that. But I think it's a twofold situation. So it's the worst of both worlds. For on the one hand, we're bringing in unprecedented numbers of migrants. On the other hand, these are societies that have absolutely lost faith in themselves and in what they stand for and what they represent. There is a culture of self-loathing across European society. So we're inviting migrants to come into our countries, but we are very stubbornly refusing to encourage them to integrate. And we have become anti-integration, because why would you want someone to integrate into societies that are institutionally racist or institutionally Islamophobic, which is what we are told all the time. So I think it's that toxic mix of uncontrolled migration as a way of the elites signaling their virtue by saying we're going to welcome in as many people as possible, plus the failure of societies to pursue any form of integration at all, or even to attempt integration, because they don't think our societies are worth integrating into. And I think that really creates a tinderbox of environment in some of our European societies.
Well, I watched very closely a couple of months ago when there were riots. I think it's fair to call them race riots in the UK, sparked by a few particular incidents. There was a gypsy child who was being picked up by child welfare services, a mass protest by the community. He was released because basically the community threatened to riot. These were Romani gypsies, not UK travelers, I think. There was a stabbing of children in Southgate, and there were some questions about who the knife man was before it happened. There was a attack by Muslim identified people in the Manchester airport, huge coverage, no arrests made. I think all of these things happening made people realize that there were kid gloves with minorities, with new immigrants, and there were riots, violent riots. There was arson. But the response to it was just as shocking. It was shocking to see race riots, but it was even more shocking to see the establishment, the thrill of prosecuting people who had tweeted things, or the police were boasting on Twitter. This man was convicted of gesticulating at police. This man was convicted of shouting at a police dog. You know, these people were getting jail terms of 2 years plus. These were the white, indigenous, working class Brits who were being given astounding sentences for basically thought crimes, not for rioting. I'm for arresting rioters. And I saw the difference between the police and the legal and the prosecutorial response to white working class Brits fed up with this violence from immigrant communities versus those immigrant communities who were doing actually violent things. And I think that in the UK, it's becoming harder and harder to talk about these things. Even Nigel Farage is being extremely careful. He's ruled out mass deportations. I think he's worried that he'll be branded far right otherwise. What do you make of what's happened in the last couple of months in the UK?
Well, I think there is, there is a two-tier justice system, it seems, to many people, and there is a two-tier policing system. I think, if you look at the riots that we had around the Southport stabbing, so this is the stabbing in Southport in the north of England, near Liverpool, where 3 young girls were killed by a man with a knife. That is what triggered the riots across the country in various different working class communities, or I guess you might call them even lower class communities. There was a real seething sense of anger. I agree with you. People who get involved in rioting deserve to be arrested. You cannot destroy your own community. You cannot set fire to things or attack police officers or smash up cars without paying a price. We want to live in civilized societies. But it seems to me unarguable that communities are treated differently depending on how the police view them and depending on how the political class more broadly views them. And there is a culture of cowardice in sections of the establishment when it comes to talking about significant problems of crime or antisocial behavior that exist in certain parts of Britain. For me, the best example of two-tier justice was in January this year. A man with a knife went into a kosher store in Golders Green in London. Golders Green is a community with a large Jewish population. He went into a kosher store and he pointed the knife at the people in the store and said, "Tell me your views on Israel and Gaza right now." That man did not spend 1 minute in jail. He was given a suspended sentence for threatening people with a knife, threatening Jews with a knife. You fast forward to the aftermath of the Southport riots, and a 53-year-old woman, was given a 15-month jail sentence for writing something on Facebook. Now, what she wrote on Facebook, in my view, was grotesque. She said, "Let's burn down the mosques." I don't think people should say that. That's incitement. That's a bad thing to say. But she wrote it on Facebook. She regretted it very quickly and she deleted it. She was given 15 months in jail, and as she was sent away, this woman who had never troubled the law before and who was is the sole carer for her husband, as she was being led away, she said, "Thank you, Your Honor." And to me, that was a very clear illustration of the fact that we have a two-tier system. We have a political class and a police forces who don't treat communities equally. And if we don't have equality before the law, then I think we're in big trouble.